Welcome to Office 2010 Video Project 25. Hey, we're studying Excel. If you want to download this workbook and follow along, click on the link directly below the video. Hey, in this video, we're talking about cell references in formulas. Now, this is like the sixth video we've done, eighth video, and in every video we use cell references. Well, in this video, we have to introduce two new cell references. They're called mixed cell references. We've already learned about relative and absolute. Let's remind ourselves about relative and absolute, and then we'll move on to the next two types of cell references. Now, I'm going to invoke that trick we learned last video. I want to highlight just this right here, and I would like to zoom into just that. Now, you can either go View, Zoom to Selection, or I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut Alt-WG. Isn't that cool there? Now, we're going to do relative and absolute cell references, and we're going to see a cool smart tag formatting trick here. Now, here's some scores. Here's the max score and student score. So we need to calculate a percentage grade. Now, I'm going to start up here because we know that if you get all the points that are the maximum number of points possible, you should get 100%, right? So we're going to build a formula here. Equals this one right here. And actually, we already did this formula in our very first video. Now, as we copy this formula down, the B2, which is really not B2, it's one cell to the left, is going to move, called a relative cell reference. It means from me, the point of view of me, the formula, I'm always going to look one cell to the left. So when I copy down, the formula will always look at the actual score. Now, to calculate a percentage grade, you take the actual score divided by B2. Now, as we copy this formula down, that B2 needs to be locked and not move, but that one needs to be moved. Let's just show ourselves that this will not work the way it is right now. Control Enter puts the formula in the cell. You can see it's already pre-formatted with percentage number format. I'm going to point to the fill handle and copy down. Oh, now that's great. Two things. One is we don't want the yellow, but we're not going to worry about that for right now. But that'd be great. I'd love this. You get 82 out of 100, and you get 100%. Well, let's, with that cell selected, hit our Edit Mode key, F2. And we can see that, sure enough, they're both relative. They both moved relatively through the copy action. Escape, Control Z to undo, F2 to edit. Now, what do we need to do? Relative, absolute, we just use, as we learned a couple of videos ago, the F4 key converts from a relative cell reference, and then I hit F4. Remember, when you hit F4, your cursor's just got to be touching somewhere. F4. Oh, it puts in the dollar signs. Those are just arbitrary symbols that were chosen to say, hey, now the column is locked and the row is locked. When you have two dollar signs, it means it's locked when you copy in any direction. All right, let's go ahead and see if we can Control Enter. And now I'd like to double click and send this down. We've seen this trick a few times when you have anything, formula, number, text, and you want to copy down and there's something to the left or to the right or below, you can simply double click. So I'm going to double click. Before we audit and make sure we got the right formula, we need to talk about the smart tag. Totally awesome. We can say, please fill without formatting. Absolutely beautiful. Now, one thing I'd like to do is I'd immediately like to increase the decimal. So I'm going to go back up to Home, and there's a little increased decimal. Again, that's something if you use all the time. Notice we were on the formulas and we had to click over to the home. You might want to add that to the quick access toolbar. In fact, I'm going to do that right now. Right click, add to quick access toolbar. Oh, that is so cool. I can build my own add to quick access toolbar. All right, I'm going to increase decimal notes from 0 to double zeros. I'm going to go down one, so I want 2 decimals. All right, now let's go down here, click in the last cell, and hit F2 to audit. Sure enough, it worked perfect. Relative, meaning throughout the copy action, it's always going to look one to my left. Absolute, locked like cement up on that B2. And that's what we want. We compare each individual item to the total possible. Now, we've learned about relative and absolute. We need to take this one step further. Now, in this example, we want to take note of which direction we are copying. Because there's only how many directions in Excel? 2. We can either copy up and down, and notice my cursor's going down. I copied it's going across numbers, which are row headers. The other possibility is to copy a formula to the side, which we're not doing here. So think about that. When you're copying down across the numbers, we're only going one direction. Well, we mentioned earlier the dollar sign in front of the B locks the column, and the dollar sign in front of the 2 locks the row. Well, we're only copying it across the row, so we actually only need the dollar sign in front of the 2. Now, most times when you make formulas and you're copying that, you don't bother to put, just a 2 in. You just put 2. I'm sorry, you don't just put one dollar sign in like we're about to do. You just put 2 and copy it down. But we want to, since we want to learn about mixed cell reference, we want to see which one of the 2 dollar signs is actually necessary in this particular formula. I'm going to click Escape, Control Z, I have to OK, so Control Y to redo. You can always use the undo and redo there. I'm going to delete all these. Highlight, delete, delete key. Remember, don't ever do right-click delete. There are circumstances where that's OK, but usually it gets you into big trouble. All right, I'm going to hit F2 here. Now, we've learned that if our cursor's touching a cell reference, we can hit the F4 key. Well, we already have the dollar signs in, so what would it do now? F4. Oh, hit it again. F4. F4. Oh, back to relative. So F4, if you hit it, it is a toggle that merry-go-rounds, like a merry-go-round turning around and round. And you can pick whichever, or edit and choose whichever cell reference you want. Now I'm going to stop on the 2. I know that I'm copying down across the rows, and I'm hypothesizing that that's the only dollar sign I need. Control Enter. Double click and send it down. Point to the fill handle, the smart tag, and say fill without formatting. I'm going to click in the last cell and hit F2. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. The formula works. And we're noticing that, in fact, we only needed one of them. We didn't need the B. Now, I'm going to click Escape. Let's go look at another example. We'll see a specific use for mixed cell references in just a moment. We're just noticing the kind of what the dollar signs do and how they work. Now, in this example here, we also did one similar to this, or maybe we didn't. But here I'd like to type for January some revenue. I'm actually going to type the word revenue. Tab. And then I'm going to type 1,000. Control Enter. And I want to format it with currency. Now, you could go up here and do currency. Or if you're lazy like me and you know keyboard shortcuts are faster, you could use Control-Shift-4. We talked about that earlier in an earlier video. Whoa, what is going on there? Railroad tracks or pound signs. No problem. That just means you're squishing me. The column is not wide enough. So come up here, and I'm going to click and drag. You can also double click, and it best fits. It actually goes through every single item in the column and finds the biggest one and fits it. So we're going to start with January revenue of 1,000. Actually, we did talk about the number 1 and a percentage increase in, I think, our first or second video. But what we'd like to do here is for each successive month, we would like to increase this. So watch this. Our formula is going to be, we need to increase by 10% for February. Then when we get over to March, March needs to be looking at February and increase it by 10%. So in this cell, I'm going to say equals. Click there. That's a relative cell reference times, and then I click on that. That 1.10, the 1 multiplied by that gives us the 1,000, and the 0.10 gives us the 10% increase. Now, look at that. I just happen to be in F4, so there's an F4 cell reference. But I want you to hit the F4 key. All right, we know F4, if we hit it once, it puts in both dollar signs. Let's Control Enter. Let's copy it over to May. I'm actually going to, I want, down here is the zoom. I want to actually click on this 160 and then change it to 157. Enter. All right, now I can kind of see the edge there. I'm going to click on the last cell and hit F2. When you're auditing your formulas, almost always, the one you really need to check is the last one in the range. Hit F2 and see if it's working. 1 to my left times F4. Beautiful. But just like we did in our last example, which one of these dollar signs is really the one we need? There's only two directions in Excel, up and down across the rows, or numbers, and across the columns, side to side, left to right, across the letters. So since we copied it this way, which is the only dollar sign we needed? I'm copying across the letters. So that's how I memorize it. I go, oh, I'm going this way. Where am I moving across? I'm moving across letters. So I'm going to Control Z to undo. Whoops. How about Control Y to keep that zoom? Highlight those and delete. I have a big frog in my throat today. F2. Now we know if our cursor's touching the cell reference, our F4 key is a toggle. So I can toggle through all the cell references. I'm going to stop just in front of the F because I know I'm copying it across this direction. That's the only one I need. Control Enter, and I'm going to copy it over. Click on the last one, F2. Oh, that worked perfectly. 1 to my left, April revenue times our 1 plus the whatever the percentage or proportional changes. It looks like it worked just fine. Now we're going to go over, and now we're going to see an example where we really have to use mixed cell reference. Because remember, in both cases, our formulas, in fact, I'm going to add some green here. Those formulas there and these ones here. We actually didn't have to use what are called mixed cell references. But now we want, all we did was we just learned that in particular circumstances when you're only going copying a formula one direction, only one of the dollar signs is needed. Let's go over and see an example where we're actually going to have to think about it and use our mixed cell references with even greater benefit. Now here's our sheet, income statement. And I got to warn you, in Chapter 3, in a couple weeks after we finish all these videos, you actually will be doing work from the textbook. And the textbook does not teach you mixed cell references. They are going to tell you, oh, create 1 formula, 2 formula, 3 formula, 5 formula, 6 formulas individually, one at a time, and copy them over. It's because they don't show you how to do mixed cell references. So we want to, this problem is almost, it's a smaller version of what the textbook will have. And we're going to see that we can do it much more quickly than the actual textbook tells us or suggests the method that we should do. Now, here's our situation. We already have our revenues. Here's our expenses. It looks like there's 5. For each month, we got to calculate expense 1, expense 2, 3, etc. We're then going to add them up. And then we're going to calculate our net income. Now, this is similar to the problem we did in video number or project number 19. But we only had one expense. That was an estimate, percentage estimate for the total expenses. But that's not usually how you build a budget or projected income statement like this. You have lots of expenses and lots of percentages. So let's click up here, and we want to investigate whether we can use mixed cell references in this circumstance. I'm going to create my first formula, equals January. OK, January revenue times, and this is expense 1, expense percentage. Now, where do we get these kind of numbers in the real world? Well, the accountants in the accounting department look at the past data and they say, you know, on average, this particular expense is always using 20 cents of every dollar we make. Right? Expense number 2 is using 15%. Maybe expense 5 is like the wage expense, so that's the biggest expense. So 33 cents out of every dollar we bring in is used up paying wages. Hopefully, when you add this up, it's not 1, because if it's 1, then we have no profit whatsoever. But let's look at this. revenue times some percentage that we've estimated based on past data. Now, if I Control Enter, that amount is correct. Now, let's just go down here and create the next one by hand. Well, actually, F2, B2 times B12. OK. Enter. Equals, notice, as I copy down this column, I'm clicking on B2 a second time. And then I'm multiplying, by a different percentage. OK? But notice as we copy down the column, it looks like every time we're going to have to use the January revenue. Control Enter. That particular formula gives us the right answer. Now let's come over here and let's try not January, but February. Click in the cell F2. Notice B2, B12. All right. Tab equals not B2, but C2. So that B2 in this formula, when we move this way, actually needs to move to February's revenue. Times, we're clicking on B12 again. OK, I'm going to Control Enter. That formula gives us the right answer. But now let's examine. Click F2. That cell reference is B2. Enter F2 to put it in edit mode. B2. OK, so this way it looks like we're going to need to lock B2. Escape. Click here, F2. All right, B2. When I tab over this direction across the columns, F2, the B2 turned to a C2. So what we see here is there are circumstances when you copy a formula down and over into it like a square or rectangle of cells. There are some cases where you're going to want the cell reference lock going one way, but not the other. And that's where mixed cell references come in. Because the word mixed means it's going to be locked one way, but not the other. Absolute one way, relative the other. B2, enter F2, B2. So absolute going down across the rows. Escape, click there, F2. B2 is going to come this way, but relative going this way. All right. That's kind of our intro. Now, here's how you do it. And there's a number, we'll get to do a number of examples here in the videos. Since this is kind of a hard topic, there is a sequence of 2 questions you can ask about each cell reference. And if you actually stop and slow down and ask the 2 questions about every cell reference, you'll get the right answer. All right, so let's ask. The first question is, let me back up. How many directions are there in Excel? There's 2. That's why there's 2 questions. OK, so I'm going to start with B2. When I copy it down, OK, so that's question number 1. I want to know what it's going to do when I copy it down across the rows. Do I need B2 locked, or do I need it to move relatively? Well, we already saw as we come down, we're always going to use in this column January revenue. So I need the row reference across the numbers locked. So I'm going to hit F4 2 times. Copy down. That number is going to be locked. And the way I do it is I say I'm going to take literally my hand and my finger and I move it down. If I do need it locked and I'm moving it and it's across numbers, $sign goes in front of the number. Now, the second question is the second direction. When we copy it across the columns, do we want this locked? B2 is January revenue, but when we're in this cell right here, the formula, should it still be looking there, or should it be looking at February? It should be looking at February. So that means when going across the letters or the columns, I don't need it locked. I want it relative. Beautiful. Mixed cell references just came to our rescue. Lock going down, but not to the side. Now, there's 2 cell references in our formula, so now we have to ask the same 2 questions about B12. All right, no problem. This cell right here, expense 1, when I copy it down to expense 2, do I want B12 to still be locked on B12? Or when I move this down, does the green box go down too? The green box should go down 15% for the second expense. So that means I'm not locking it when I go down across the row. So I'm not going to do anything. Now, what about the second direction? Because remember, there's two directions. That means two questions about each cell reference. So now, when I copy this direction from B to C to D, across the letters, the columns, well, what do I want? Oh, if I didn't lock it, what would happen? I'd move the formula over one, and the green box would go over one. Well, there's 0. There's nothing in the green box there. So that means I need this one locked across the columns. So I'm going to hit the F4 1, 2, 3 times. And there it is. $sign in front of the B, but not the 12. Locked this way, so the green box doesn't move when it goes across the columns. But when it goes down, it actually does move. All right, here's the moment of truth. Control Enter. Don't double click and send it down because there's different formulas down here. I'm going to click and drag. It's a two-step process. Once you drag it down, you have to let go of your mouse. Notice this is a selection cursor. And then re-grab with the fill handle with your angry rabbit and drag it across. Now, this is the first time we've copied a formula to a rectangle of cells. So we need to know which one to check. Well, you go diagonally across, click on the one furthest away, and hit F2. That is just amazing. Look at that. A whole sea of formulas. And it took us just creating one formula, copying it down and over. And look at that. The blue one is perfectly sitting and looking at April. And the B16 is perfectly looking at expense 5 percentage. Now, what do we have to do? We have to add these up. And I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut Alt equals. And notice we've talked about this a few times. When you use functions and Microsoft tries to help you by putting the range in, it doesn't always get it right. So you got to be aware. It's a two-step process. Alt equals. Check it out. Doesn't look right. I'm with the dancing and still dancing. I'm going to click and drag and redirect it. Control Enter. And I can copy it over. Click in the last cell and F2. Beautiful. Escape. Now I click in net income. Net income is equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 above minus 1 above. And this is going to work perfectly for February, March, April. The cell reference boxes will move perfectly when we copy it. Control Enter. Point to the fill handle and drag. Click in the last cell, F2. Looking good. All right, a couple more examples. Since this is kind of hard to do, there is a memorization trick. And I had to use this quite a lot when I was first learning mixed cell references. Multiplication table. Anytime I'd forget, I'd be like doing some budget or something, and I would be like, oh, I forgot how to do mixed cell references. I just quickly go 1 to 12, 1 to 12, and then I do my little formula, copy down and over, and I'll be like, oh, that's how you do it. Now notice when we go back to income statement, one of the requirements for mixed cell references, notice we kind of have like column headers here, and our row headers just happen to be down here, but it's as if they could have been right here. So anytime you have that situation, some formula inputs as column headers and formula inputs as row headers, then you can use mixed cell references. Same here, and that's why I love this problem for helping me to remember how to do this. All right, and we know how this works, right? In any one of these cells, it's equals column header times row header. By the way, when I was teaching my stepson how to do Excel, I made him do the whole entire table by hand, individual formulas. And then I taught him how to do cell references, which of course is the greatest incentive there is to learn how to do cell references. Isn't that mean, though? Oh. All right, I'm going to do my formula here. Equals, the column header times the row header. Notice this is a row. That's at the head of the row. This is the column, the head of the column. Now, we have to ask our two questions of each one of these. When I copy it down, do I need to use one here, 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 and here? You betcha. So I'm copying down across the numbers. So I'm going to hit the F4 key 1 and 2 times. Second question, when I copy this direction, do I want it locked on the blue box there, or do I need the blue box to move? It needs to move. Done with that one. Second cell reference. second set of two questions. And why are there two questions? Two directions for copying. All right, now this one. When I copy it down, do I need to lock that A3 on that, or do I need to have it move relatively? When I get down here, should it be looking at 1 or should it be looking at 6? It should be looking at 6. Now, that's the first direction. Now, when I copy this direction, do I want it relative or absolute? Locked on A3 or move relatively? Well, over here, I want 4 times, 1. So I want it locked, moving across the column. So I'm going to hit F4 3 times. And that's it. By the way, when you're learning this, I've been teaching this for so long. This is one of the hardest concepts. When you're first trying to do it, don't look over the answer sheet or something. Just do the sledgehammer method. Try every single possibility until you get it right. But really, if you ask those two questions, you should never have to resort to the sledgehammer method. Although I remember learning this, and it wasn't easy. But those two questions will do it. OK, I got my fingers crossed. Control Enter. I'm going to double click and send this down. And then I'm going to copy this over like this. Click in the last cell, hit F2. Now I've got to show you one other alternative for when you have a sea of formulas or a rectangle shape formulas like this. I'm going to highlight all these and delete. Instead of doing it in the cell and then double clicking and sending it down and copying over with a two-step process, you can pre-select all of the cells that get the same formula or thing. In our case, it's a formula. And then you can build your formula. Now, notice I did it quickly there, but once I have, this is called the active cell. Whatever you put in the active cell, well, whether it's a formula like our example or a word or a number or anything, to populate all the cells with that thing, hold Control and tap Enter. So it's Control Enter. That's another one that if you do on a entrance exam for your work, they'll say, OK, you're hired, or something like that. One last example, and this example will illustrate most firmly why we have to ask those questions all the time. Now, I'm actually in the printed book, and in this input is here, but I'm actually going to move this over. Notice I have two cells, so I'm going to highlight it. I could Control X and then click in this cell and Control V for paste. We saw this over in Word and a couple other examples too. That cursor right there is called the move cursor. So sometimes if you're already, like notice my hand is on the mouse and I'm clicking and dragging. It's almost, since the cursor's almost to the edge, it's probably faster just to click on the edge and move with the move cursor. Control Z, watch. The trouble can be is if you, just don't let go of it till the gray box is in the right place. All right, now let's come over here, and this is a great example. And we're going to use something called the future value function, which is finance. But don't worry about that. We're just going to use this example to illustrate cell references. All right, so for any given, and let me do this. I'm going to add some color here. For any given intersection here, just like the multiplication table, and for that matter, the income statement, for this pension calculation, we're going to put in $3,000 each year. But in this cell, I need to figure out what the value of my pension is at 20 years if I can earn 12%. Now, I'm shooting this in 2011, and it's hard to get this kind of return right now. But over 20, 30 years, at least history shows that these kind of returns are not too hard to get. History. All right, but for any given cell, way over here, $3,000 in each year, 35 years, and I was earning 14%. And I wanted to estimate what the pension will be worth when I retire. All right, so I'm going to actually zoom in here. Whoops. Make this as big as possible. Boop. And we're going to build our formula using the future value function. The rate is going to be this. That's the rate of return we're expecting, comma, NPER, number of periods, that one there, comma, and the PMT, that is a payment made at the end of each year, regular equal amounts with the time interval between each payment the same. Boop. All right. Now, if I teach finance classes and we do it all in Excel, and I get to show you the lovely math behind it, but Excel is just awesome for financial calculations. All right. So future value function is going to do some pretty complicated math for us. But let us just think about cell references. Notice, oh, there's some formula inputs as column headers and a row header, formula input as a row header. Oh, that's just like our multiplication table, right? And then this one we'll have to deal with when we get to it. All right, so what's the question? Two directions, two questions. When I copy down for this whole column, do I need the 10%? Yes, I do. So I'm copying down across the columns that says I must lock the number. So I'm going to hit F4 twice. What about when I go to the side? Do I want it locked on 10%, or does the blue box move? It moves. So since I'm moving across the letters, the columns, no $sign in front of the letter. All right, what about this one? Copy down, down, down. Does F13 need to be locked on 10? Or when I get down here, does it need to be 25? It needs to be 25. So when I copy it down, it is relative cell reference. No $sign in front of that 13. No $sign. Right, when I go this way, though, same as our multiplication table and our income statement, it needs to be locked on the 10. So I'm moving this direction. $sign goes in front of the letter, F4 3 times. What about this one? When I copy down, does that purple box need to be moving too, or should it be locked? It should be locked. So I'm going to say, oh, numbers, so I'm going to hit F4 twice. Now, what about when I go this direction? Boom, boom. Do I want the purple box to move this direction? No. This is an example where I have to have it locked in both directions. So I'm actually, say I've toggled too far, so now I'm going to hit F4 again. F4, now it toggles back to relative and then back to absolute. Now, Control Enter. We're going to come immediately down here because financial functions know cash flow. And when you have money going out of your wallet and you're sending it to your pension fund or whatever investment vehicle you have, that's a minus out of your wallet. So I'm going to put this into edit mode, click at the beginning, and type a minus. That cash flow has to be minus for the outflow when you retire after 10 years to be positive. Now, I'm going to double click and send this down, and then copy this over. I'm going to click the last cell and hit F2 for edit. Actually, let me escape. These are not made up numbers. If you save for 50 years, $3,000 each year, and you earn 15%, you would have $21 million. That's the power of compound interest. But what we're interested in here is the F2 key to see edit mode. That is unbelievable. The blue box is exactly in the right place. The green one is exactly in the right place, and the purple one is exactly in the right place. Those cell references, this is called mixed with the row locked, mixed with the column locked, and this is absolute. Absolutely, totally amazing. It is not easy to learn, so you got to practice a lot, but it is one of the dividing lines between being really good in Excel and just ordinary. And as you can see, imagine doing all those calculations by hand if we didn't know mixed cell references. All right, our next video, we'll actually do a little bit more with cell references and how to set up formula inputs. All right, see you next video.